Dive straight into today's agenda. And what are we going to be talking about? There's really four pieces here to the presentation. One is we're going to be talking about what's driving the need for generative AI in the contact center. And for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with Crusta, we're a unified platform for human and AI agents working with some of the world's largest contact centers from United Airlines to Cox Communications and others. And so we've got a bunch of experience deploying generative AI in the contact center. So excited to walk you through what we've learned by working with a number of different folks. The second topic that we're going to jump into is the great automation versus augmentation debate. The third is the five levels of automation and augmentation maturity for the contact center. Where do you want to start and where do you want to go to? We'll talk through a couple of those things. And last but not least, and really, really importantly, how to implement AI without losing the human touch within the contact center. So let's dive right into each of those four topics. The first one being what's driving the need for generative AI in the contact center. And in talking to a number of folks, these are a couple of the themes that we're seeing. One is that we've got increased customer expectations for faster and personalized service. And I imagine we're all getting the pressure to do better in terms of FCR, first call resolution across all of our contact centers, uh, delivering faster and more effective service. The second one is growing pressure on contact centers to optimize operational efficiency. For those of you that have been in the contact center for a while, we're trying to change the perception of the contact center as a cost center in the organization, and there's constant pressure to do more with less. The third is the rise of AI automation and tools for faster and smarter customer interactions. We again work with a number of folks in the Fortune 1000 that have just had a kind of blanket statement uh, demand from either the board or the C-level to introduce artificial intelligence for greater efficiency across the board. But many of us are asking ourselves, where do we start, right? And last but not least, we have a need to scale while maintaining or improving CSAT or the customer experience. And this kind of lends itself back to that do more with less. But if we were to double click on all of these things, there's a few kind of consistent themes as to why one would want to introduce Gen AI into the contact center that we're seeing working with a variety of different customers. And the first one is just reminding ourselves that our biggest investment in OpEx is more oftentimes in labor. And you couple that with what we've seen in terms of attrition, and on the lower end you might be at 40%, maybe you're at 30%, but we've seen annual attrition of folks in our contact center be up to 40, 50, 60%. And that makes for a really, really hard time in terms of onboarding, in terms of enablement and making folks successful, only for them to attrit oftentimes at the end of the year. There's probably a meaningful opportunity there for Gen AI to help. The second one is the inefficient workflows. And I know many of us have probably gone through and looked at our quality management practices and asked ourselves, why are we only listening to, 1 or 2% of conversations? There's probably a better way. It's a pretty inefficient workflow to go through and manually understand what's happening across chats and calls and the like. The third thing is a lack of visibility. And this visibility, like we want to harness this treasure trove of customer facing conversations, but it's really, really hard to do so. Customer facing conversations happening in the contact center are what we should be making business decisions on, process decisions on, product decisions on. And for oftentimes for the leadership team, it's really, really hard to get those insights, let alone for those of us that are leading contact centers. And for some of us out there in the audience, I imagine that we've started to deploy different solutions for different parts of even what we had just described and talked about. But that's led to siloed systems and data. And the proliferation of individual point solutions increases the total cost of ownership and reduces value. If you can kind of unify on one AI layer, then you can get, multiples of value, not just incremental value. So this is what we're starting to see as to why folks are looking to generative AI in the contact center. Now, the question is, where do you start, right? And this is where kind of the great debate that we're talking about shows up. Do you start with automation or do you start with augmentation? And before we go into the different flavors of what we're talking about when it comes to automation and augmentation, let's first break those kind of two buckets down. When it comes to automation, uh, we're talking about full kind of like end-to-end automation. Um, think virtual agents, think chatbots, et cetera, things that are actually potentially replacing even in human agents. When we're talking about augmentation, we're talking a lot more of things like copilots. What are solutions that can make the process faster, not fully replace, but actually just instead make process more efficient for our agents today. But let's talk about a couple of use cases and kind of what do we mean by that. Within automation, here's a couple, and I'm not going to go through each and every one. We talked a little bit about the virtual agent use case for automation. That's one, but it doesn't have to be kind of like full end to end, right? Another good example of automation that leads to dramatic impact in terms of things like average handle time is simply automatic call summarization and reducing the need for agents to type in notes after a call or after a chat and automatically pushing those notes in that summary into either a case or your CRM or whatever you're using on that front. Another example of automation can be auto tagging and categorization. A lot of work is done doing things like dispositions or things like tagging sentiment or call outcomes. But AI can now do that automatically for you. These are a few of the examples as to what we're talking about when it comes to automation. Now, on the augmentation side of things, here's a couple of different use cases for all of you to consider. Knowledge management is one that I'm particularly passionate about, but sitting in call centers myself, I've seen reps put folks on hold, look for different PDFs to try to find the answer to whatever obscure question may come up. I talked about earlier that we do some work with United Airlines and their global contact centers. And there's questions that come up every day that agents may not be fully equipped for because they're just not getting them that often, right? Things like, how do I bring a surfboard onto my flight? Being able to immediately pop up on the corner of the screen the right article or the right hint for that agent is another way to go about it. Can be really, really powerful in terms of augmenting your existing human agent team. Another example here is performance insights and training. But AI can take, the difficult task of finding coachable moments for your rep or for your managers and immediately showcase to the manager, hey, this was an area where an agent didn't follow a behavior that you're looking uh, to standardize across the entire team, and you can immediately jump in as a manager and show that agent, hey, this is where we maybe fell off track and can help them get back on track. So those are a few of the flavors of augmentation when we talk about this particular bucket. Now, wherever you want to start augmentation or automation, we've started in a variety of different areas with the customers that we're working with. But ultimately, wherever you start, you want to go towards AI transformation. I think all of us can probably agree that uh, the use cases that we're seeing in AI today across the entire spectrum of augmentation to automation are incredibly powerful. And so considering both of those and creating a roadmap for you and your organization that's specific to you is going to be really, really important. Now, we talked about there being a few levels of maturity that we've seen in the work that we're doing. And here are kind of the 5 ways that we've broken that down. Level one being, manual and reactive. You're not really doing any kind of like augmentation or automation or use of AI today, all the way down to that bottom level, level 5, or kind of you're fully mature. And there we're talking about end-to-end workflow automation. We've also called out here what is kind of the human role at each of these levels. I'm speaking to it at a high level because we're going to dive a little bit deeper into each of these levels here. And I'll provide again a couple of different examples for each of these. So manual and reactive, this is probably relatively straightforward, but here we're talking about kind of like no automation or perhaps IVRs. I know a lot of folks today have been, used to using IVRs for the past couple of decades. That's another example of kind of like a manual version or reactive version of automation in this case. Where it gets more interesting as we go into the different levels as we go a little bit deeper. And when we're talking about assisted and basic automation, things that I want to kind of start to plant in your head on this level is like basic AI powered tools, things like suggested responses on the left-hand side. You're looking at a kind of simulated chat conversation, but AI can understand, what's the context of the conversation and simply suggest responses back to agents. And just introducing this level of augmentation in this case for your agents can dramatically reduce average handle time because now they're instead of typing out an answer, they're just clicking the answer. Or another version of this on chat might be autocomplete, which is the ability for AI to predict what that agent's going to say and simply finish the sentence for them by them pressing tab. We've probably all experienced this as we're, maybe writing emails on Gmail as an example. Another version of this can be automatic summaries, and we talked about that a little bit earlier, but AI understanding the entirety of the conversation and then generating that summary for an agent, then thus reducing after call work and allowing them to immediately push that into again a case or the CRM, what have you. Now the third level is when we're starting to get more into kind of like the true augmentation use cases, a little bit further than just some of the more basic use cases that we talked about within level two. But think about this one as things like hints. You've got another conversation example happening here on the right-hand side. And as a couple of examples are showing up here, one is you see a checklist on the top left there. That's the ability for AI to, again, understand what's being said as the conversation's going on, understand the checklist that you want each agent to go through as they're going through these types of conversations, and then help them check the box or automatically check the box as they go through every single step of the conversation to ensure compliance and to ensure that your agents are following exactly kind of like what the guidelines are that you want to instill. And then you see a couple of other things in there, things like the crusted notes in the middle is just another example of kind of automatic summaries that's happening in real time as the conversation's happening. Level four now is when we get into kind of this hybrid world, right? Of human and AI kind of like working seamlessly together, where AI starts to take care of the heavy lifting. And an example of this that I'm particularly passionate about is AI-driven voice of customer analysis. And you see an example of that here on the left-hand side, but AI now has the ability to understand natural language questions that may be keeping you up at night. I know I work with a number of different executives that have questions that they would be dying to ask of all of their customer-facing conversations. And now AI enables you to do that, where you can just type in questions that are keeping you up at night, and they'll immediately pull the answers based off of the conversations and show the evidence of where those kind of like topics or things are coming up in the actual conversations themselves. And this now is kind of, again, we talk about this as a hybrid world because what we've typically seen in the market is a lot of times you have these questions, maybe you hire an outside analyst or you have a team of analysts internally, and you're waiting, weeks, months, to get those answers back. But now you're in a world where you're just simply working with AI and AI can give you those answers in minutes as opposed to months. Okay, Russell, you've walked us through levels one through four. What is kind of like the nirvana state? Where are we going to with level five? And that's kind of the fully autonomous solutions. A great example of this is going to be your virtual agents that not only can handle like resolution or troubleshooting, but do true like end-to-end workflow automation. And if somebody maybe perhaps calls in, say you're a telecommunications company and somebody calls in with a billing error, AI can now actually handle that conversation end to end and take them from understanding the problem, understanding who that customer is and the metadata associated with that customer, and also do the kind of like billing workflow with the working through the right APIs where if there is a billing issue and the VA can then understand that and perhaps maybe give the customer a month off for free because there was some sort of billing error. And obviously you would put the guardrails in as you're building kind of the guidance for that virtual agent. But now AI can take you kind of full end to end. Now, again, this is the level 5. This is where we're getting to kind of fully autonomous. But you can start kind of anywhere across the entirety of the spectrum from level 1 to level 5. And these are just a couple of examples that I like to call out as I'm working with different customers. Now, the question that oftentimes comes up after we talk through the vision of an autonomous future is how do I implement AI without losing the human touch? And there's really kind of three buckets to this. One is I always encourage folks to define the AI strategy with a human-centric approach. And what I mean by that is we oftentimes recommend folks starting with augmentation, that level 1, level 2 type use cases, which allows you to build a path towards full automation. And it allows you to start to collect some of the data based off of human conversations to then build excellent, fully autonomous virtual agents as an example. And that's what I mean by that middle pillar there when I say AI augmented workflows can lead you to automation. And as you start to harness the power of augmentation, you can then start to identify easy use cases to start to automate. For example, I'm really excited about some of the work that we're doing with Brinks Home Security, and they've just launched a virtual agent through Cresta as an example. And that virtual agent for now is handling basic troubleshooting and authentication, and then handing off more complex use cases to a live agent. So there's true kind of interoperability between the true kind of like automation, and then you have an augmented human agent that's effectively solving the customer's problem. But even automating just a portion of a conversation is a great place to start because if you're chopping off 2 minutes up front at the beginning of a conversation, that's a massive savings for the organization, and you can get more out of what you're doing with your human agents. And then, of course, the last pillar here is to make sure that you're optimizing with feedback loops and constantly training the AI. But the AI should be learning from real human interactions. You should be identifying automation opportunities based off of what you're seeing across the existing kind of human conversations to help you create that roadmap towards full automation, like we talked about. And I'm going to welcome that. With that, I'm going to welcome back Brooke to the stage for a little bit of Q&A.
Yeah, thanks so much, Russell. And thank you for sharing those 5 levels of automation. Because I feel like we don't necessarily know what that future looks like what that full maturity looks like. And it's really great to see you break it down. And I'm sure for our audience, it's incredibly helpful because, AI can feel daunting sometimes. So it's really great to see a framework like that. So thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to just dive a little bit deeper into this topic and get the conversation going. So, according to our most recent market study, we actually found that 95% of leaders say that their agents are going to focus on more complex interactions as simple issues become more automated. We also see the narrative that chatbots and agentic AI can replace agents. So, do you believe there's any truth to that narrative? Will AI eventually replace humans entirely in the contact center?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I know is very, very top of mind for many contact center leaders today. Actually, at the last Cresta customer advisory board, I asked the group, like, in 3 years, how much automation do you think is happening with AI agents or virtual agents? And the reality is, Brooke, is that many folks will fall across a pretty large spectrum. there's some folks that are saying, hey, we're in a really, truly highly regulated industry. And so we're probably only going to be able to automate smaller parts of either calls or chats, and they see a world where they're maybe 20 or 30% automated. Now, some of our customers are a little bit more ambitious and want to see that transformative impact on their operational expenses. And they see a world where in the next few years they are 90% automated. I think the important thing is it's totally fine to be across that entire spectrum, and there's going to be value that you can capture no matter where you start. It's about being really intentional about the use cases that you want to start with.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And also, like you said, it's so dependent on the industry that you're in and also like the goals that you're looking for. If you're in a more human-centered industry, like say insurance or healthcare, like you probably don't want to reach that 90% threshold because it just doesn't make sense in your business. So I'm sure understanding those goals and keeping that top of mind as you enter the journey is so important.
Totally.
So Oh, sorry. So the AI journey, as I just said, it can be daunting for so many leaders, and we want to demystify some of those challenges that maybe arise when organizations do begin implementation. So, what's maybe a common mistake that you see companies make when they do implement Gen AI in their contact center?
Yeah, I would say that the most common mistake is to try to do too much too quickly. And we walked through some of like the maturity levels from level 1 to level 5 a little bit earlier. And I think when folks see the power of generative AI, many folks want to just jump straight in and do everything kind of like all at once. But really, you should view this as something that kind of like builds upon itself over time. It's a truly an AI transformation journey, not kind of like a like silver bullet that you can then go and deploy immediately. In a couple of ways I've seen folks kind of start is they want to do both human augmentation and kind of full automation with virtual agents at the same time, but maybe they haven't laid the groundwork for what is going to be create an incredible virtual agent experience. Having, for example, your knowledge management system or your knowledge base in a really great spot creates a solid foundation for you to be able to do virtual agents really well because it is that knowledge that then gets put into all of the foundation for that virtual agent. So I usually recommend for folks to pick a very specific high impact use case, go down that path first, and then kind of like create your own roadmap within the organization.
Yeah, I mean, that's great advice. And I'm sure as people are entering this journey, it can be overwhelming and exciting at the same time. Like you said, they want to jump all in and really like transform their contact center, which, ultimately is the end goal. But at the same time, starting small and making sure that you're tracking changes, you're looking at all of your metrics and making sure that, what you're doing is working first before you dive in and try to transform everything at once and you don't know exactly what you're doing. I'm sure it is such a great way to approach it.
Yeah, and it's such a great point, Brooke, because ultimately generative AI also is going to be a meaningful investment for the organization. And so making sure that you can actually pinpoint the change and the impact that that change has driven will only help making, the business case a little bit easier.
Definitely. So in your presentation, you mentioned that augmentation and automation kind of together is the key to driving real transformation in 2025. So how do you see the balance between automation and augmentation evolving as we move forward? And then how can organizations actually prepare their teams for this shift?
Yeah, great question. Um, I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, but I do very much so see many folks starting with augmentation, and many folks have started to deploy some of those basic augmentation use cases, some of the ones on kind of like level two or level one. Um, but where I see 2025 evolving to is folks really being clear about the initial use cases that they want to deploy for automation and as we talk to different organizations, as we talk to different leaders within one organization, everyone has their own idea as to what they want to do with automation. And so I think what the focus for many folks should be in this year as you're looking about at different automation use cases is where do we have the least amount of complexity, but potentially the highest impact? And I shared one example with Brinks Home Security where they're simply doing authentication and some basic troubleshooting, which, yes, maybe only solves for 1, 2, or 3 minutes at the height of every conversation, but it's those 1, 2, or 3 minutes that make up a majority of the reasons that folks are reaching out to the contact center today. So I think putting in a little bit of work into identifying those initial use cases with little complexity, but very, very high impact is where folks are going to focus throughout the course of this year.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think, yeah, high impact, low complexity. I think everyone in this call, I'm sure, can and hopefully use that as a guide to understand where they should be looking next. Okay, so how should businesses like if they have a large tech stack, maybe they have a few different technologies in their tech stack already, how should they think about integrating AI within their existing tech stack? And then maybe what are the most important next steps as they look forward when starting this journey?
Yes, there's really two things I want to recommend here on this one. I think one is finding an AI partner that can work really effectively with your existing tech stack. And I know many folks out there in the audience are going to want to kind of like consolidate. I know that's a big theme that we've seen in the market. But you have to find, you have to create a path towards consolidation. So figuring out what works with your existing tech stack is going to be really important. There's many folks that believe, in the market today that, hey, I haven't even made the move from on-premise into the cloud yet for CCaaS. And there's some partners out there that can actually introduce AI into on-premise, setups as an example. And so highly encourage you to work with different AI partners and truly understand how they can work with your existing setup. So that way, as you go towards consolidation, you can immediately get it in and build your path there. And then I would say that the second one is just to make sure that as you're talking to all of your different vendors across your tech stack, that you spend a little bit of time on understanding their roadmap and where they're going. I think so often folks overlook this and we get kind of used to the status quo and we're happy with an existing solution for one part of the contact center. Maybe that thing just handles, automated quality assurance for you as an example. And we get kind of used to that. But if you are going to truly go on an AI transformation journey, I encourage you to press your partners, press your vendors to get clear understanding as to where they're going, so that way you can make decisions that helps future-proof the contact center for an AI future.
That's great. And thank you so much, Russell, for sharing. As we kind of end off here, any final thoughts or key takeaways that you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, I would say that the last thing that I'll mention, and we've mentioned it a couple of times here today, but I think it bears reinforcing as kind of the closing thought, is a lot of this can both be very exciting, but also incredibly daunting. And know that you don't have to take down everything all at once. I think finding again that high impact, low complexity use case is where I encourage everybody to start. It's going to be a journey, not something that you're going to try to solve for by tomorrow, right? So encourage you to spend a little bit of time up front doing some pre-work before you go into the implementation of generative AI into the contact center. You're going to be thanking yourself for it later.
Well, thank you so much, Russell. It's so great to hear from technology leaders like yourself. Obviously, this series is focused on agentic AI, generative AI. So it's so great to hear from you sharing your insights on the topic and how we can enter this AI journey with confidence and conviction. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And for any of you out there in the audience, if I can be helpful or Cresta can be helpful, feel free to reach out to me. I'm constantly checking my LinkedIn emails, so feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to help. And hopefully, I didn't invite a bunch of people to start selling to me now. I do check my LinkedIn now.
Thanks so much. And thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks.